"Is that the father of the bride?" My daughter's new mother-in-law said at the reception. She didn't whisper. She wanted people to hear. "He looks like he should be parking the cars." 3 tables laughed. My daughter, my only child, the girl I raised alone for 17 years, stared down at her plate. She didn't defend me. She didn't even look at me. I sat in my old suit, the same one I wore at her mother's funeral, and I smiled, because what nobody in that room knew, not the in-laws, not the guests, not even my own daughter, was about to change everything before dessert was served. But I'm getting ahead of myself. You're probably wondering how a father ends up being humiliated at his own daughter's wedding. How the girl he raised, the girl he sacrificed everything for, could sit there and let strangers mock the man who gave her life. I'll tell you, but first, you need to understand something about me. My name is Walter Briggs. I'm 66 years old. I live in a small house on the edge of Collinsville, Missouri, a town most people drive through without stopping. I drive a 2004 Ford pickup truck. I wear jeans and flannel shirts 6 days a week. On Sundays, I wear khakis. I look like exactly what people assume I am, a retired man living on a modest pension. But that's not what I am, not even close. And the only person who ever knew the full truth was my late wife, Catherine. She died when our daughter, Sophie, was 12 years old, pancreatic cancer, 8 weeks from diagnosis to funeral. I held Catherine's hand in the hospital the night before she passed. She could barely speak, but she grabbed my wrist and whispered, "Walter, don't let success change who you are, and don't let Sophie forget where she came from." I promised her I wouldn't. I kept that promise. Maybe too well. See, what Catherine was referring to wasn't some philosophical idea. It was something very specific. When I was 31 years old, I invented a small piece of technology, a microvalve used in industrial water filtration systems. It doesn't sound glamorous, because it isn't, but that little valve ended up being installed in water treatment plants across 37 countries. I patented it. Then I licensed it. Then the royalties started coming. By the time Sophie was born, I was worth $11 million. By the time Catherine died, that number had grown past 90 million. And by the time Sophie got married, 1.3 billion. But I still drove the same truck, still lived in the same house, still mowed my own lawn every Saturday morning. Because Catherine asked me to stay the same. And when you lose the love of your life, you hold on to every promise like it's sacred ground. The problem was, I never told Sophie. She grew up thinking we were comfortable, not wealthy. She had a normal childhood, public school, used car at 16, state university. I paid for everything quietly, but I never handed her anything extravagant. I thought I was protecting her. What I was really doing was building a gap between us, one that someone else would eventually fill. And those someones were the Davenport family. Sophie met Jonathan Davenport during her second year of law school. He was charming, well-dressed. He came from a family that owned a chain of luxury car dealerships across the Midwest. The Davenports were wealthy, or at least that's what they needed everyone to believe. Big house, country club membership, designer everything. Jonathan's mother, Vivian Davenport, carried herself like royalty. She had this way of looking at people, like she was appraising a piece of furniture she had no intention of buying. The first time I met her, she shook my hand with 2 fingers and said, "So, you're the father." Not "nice to meet you." Not "Sophie has told us so much about you." Just, "You're the father," like I was a footnote in my own daughter's story. Her husband, Richard, was no better. He looked at my truck parked in the driveway and actually chuckled. "That thing still run?" he asked. "Every day," I said. He didn't laugh with me. He laughed at me, but I didn't say anything. I figured these were the people my daughter chose. I'd give them a chance. That was my first mistake. But it wasn't my biggest one. Not by a long shot. Over the next 2 years, things escalated slowly. Sophie started visiting less. The phone calls dropped from weekly to biweekly, then monthly. When I'd call, she'd answer, but she sounded different, distant, like she was performing a role she hadn't fully memorized yet. One Thanksgiving, she brought Jonathan and his parents to my house. Vivian walked to my front door, scanned the living room, and said, right in front of me, Well, it's cozy. She said cozy the way someone says contagious. Richard sat on my couch like it might leave a stain on his khakis. I'd spent 2 days cooking. Turkey, homemade cranberry sauce, Catherine stuffing recipe, the same meal I'd made Sophie every Thanksgiving since she was a baby. Vivian took one bite, placed her fork down, and pushed her plate forward. Do you have any sparkling water? She asked. I can't really do tap. I looked at Sophie. She was staring at her plate again. Dad, she said quietly, not meeting my eyes. Maybe next year we could do Thanksgiving at their place. They have more room. I just nodded, but something cracked inside me that day. Something quiet and deep that I didn't yet know how to name. Then came the wedding planning. Sophie called me one evening. I could hear the nervousness in her voice before she even spoke. Dad, Jonathan's parents are helping us plan the wedding. They want to host it at their country club. Okay, I said, whatever makes you happy, sweetheart. The thing is, it's going to be a big event. 300 guests. Very formal. I can do formal. There was a long pause. Dad, Vivian suggested that maybe you'd be more comfortable just attending as a guest, instead of, walking me down the aisle. I didn't speak for 10 full seconds. She said, what? She just thinks, with the crowd, the style of event, she doesn't want anyone to feel out of place. Sophie, I'm your father. I know, Dad. I told her no. You're walking me down the aisle. She said the right words, but the way she said them, hesitant, almost apologetic, told me something I did not want to hear. My daughter was ashamed of me, the girl I read bedtime stories to every single night until she was 11, the girl I taught to ride a bike, change a tire, and make her mother's pot roast. She was ashamed of the man who did all of that because he drove an old truck and lived in a small house. I didn't say a word, but the worst part hadn't happened yet. Not even close. 3 weeks before the wedding, I got a phone call that changed everything. It was from Rachel, Sophie's college roommate and maid of honor. Rachel had always been kind to me. She called me Mr. B and meant it with genuine warmth. Mr. B, I need to tell you something, she said. Her voice was shaking. What is it, Rachel? I was at the Davenport's house last night for the rehearsal dinner planning. I overheard Vivian and Richard in the kitchen. They didn't know I was in the hallway. She paused. Rachel, just tell me. They were laughing about you. Vivian said you were an embarrassment. She said she'd already told Jonathan to make sure you were seated at the back table during the reception, away from any important guests. And Richard said... Another pause. What did Richard say? He said, at least the old man won't cost us anything. He probably can't afford a wedding gift over $50. I closed my eyes. Thank you, Rachel. Mr. B, are you okay? I'm fine. Thank you for caring enough to call. I hung up and sat at my kitchen table for a very long time. Catherine's photograph was hanging on the wall across from me. She was smiling in it, that wide, generous, fearless smile she always wore. I looked at her and said out loud, I kept my promise, Kath. I stayed the same. But I think it's time they learn exactly who they've been laughing at. And that was the night everything changed. The next morning, I called my attorney, Gerald Hoffman. Gerald had managed my affairs for over 20 years. He was one of only 4 people on the planet who knew the true scope of what I had. Gerald, I need a favor. Name it. The Davenport family. Richard and Vivian. I need a full financial background. Quiet. Thorough. How deep? As deep as it goes. Gerald called me back 48 hours later. What he told me made me sit down. Walter, the Davenports are broke. What do you mean, broke? Worse than broke. Richard's dealership chain has been hemorrhaging money for 3 years. He's leveraged everything, the house, the business. Even the country club membership is on credit. They're approximately $14 million in debt. I stared at the wall. There's more, Gerald said. Jonathan has undisclosed student loan debt, roughly $280,000 that Sophie knows nothing about. My grip tightened on the phone. And Walter, this is the part that made me angry. There's a prenuptial agreement. Jonathan's attorney drafted it, but it's not a standard prenup. It's structured so that in the event of divorce, Jonathan retains full control of any shared assets. Sophie would walk away with virtually nothing. It's buried in legalese, but it's essentially a financial trap. The room went very still. They think Sophie has nothing, I said. Correct, but they see her as a rising attorney with strong earning potential. Walter, I believe this family is marrying your daughter as a long-term financial strategy. She's an investment to them. Silence. Walter, are you still there? I'm here. What would you like to do? I looked at Catherine's photograph one more time. I swear, for a half second, her smile got wider. I want to go to that wedding, Gerald, and I want you to come with me. As your attorney? As my guest? Gerald paused. Then he chuckled. That quiet, confident chuckle only a man holding a royal flush can make. I'll bring the paperwork. The day of the wedding arrived. I wore my old suit, the Catherine suit. I didn't wear it because I had nothing else. I wore it because I wanted the Davenports to see exactly what they expected. I wanted them comfortable in their arrogance, relaxed in their cruelty, because comfortable people make careless mistakes. The ceremony was beautiful. I'll give them that. 300 guests. White roses cascading from every arched string quartet playing Pachelbel as Sophie walked toward Jonathan. When I walked her down the aisle, I heard Vivian whisper to a woman beside her, "Well, at least he cleaned up somewhat." I squeezed Sophie's arm gently and kept walking. During the vows, I watched my daughter's face. She was happy, genuinely happy. And despite everything, despite the lies, the disrespect, the cruelty, that still mattered to me more than any amount of money. But happiness built on deception is a house built on sand. And I wasn't about to let my daughter drown in someone else's lie. The reception was at the country club. Crystal chandeliers. 7-course meal. Open bar with top-shelf champagne. I was seated at table 14. Back corner, next to the kitchen doors. My table mates were 2 of Jonathan's distant cousins who clearly didn't want to be there, and an elderly great-aunt who fell asleep before the salad arrived. Gerald sat beside me, perfectly composed in his quiet gray suit. He didn't look like much, but Gerald had the kind of calm that makes powerful men very, very nervous. The toast began. Richard Davenport stood first. He talked about his son, about family legacy, about the Davenport standard of excellence. Then he raised his glass and said, "We want to welcome Sophie into our family. She may come from humble beginnings, but we believe in lifting people up." He looked directly at me when he said, "humble beginnings." Polite laughter rippled across the room. Sophie's eyes dropped to her lap. Gerald leaned over and whispered, "Say the word." "Not yet," I said. "Let them finish." Then Vivian took the microphone. Oh, Vivian. She talked about planning the wedding, about how challenging it was to coordinate with limited input from the bride's side. "But that's perfectly understandable," she said with a razor-thin smile. "Not everyone is accustomed to events at this level. I'm sure Sophie's father did the very best he could." She paused for effect, even if that meant arriving in a pickup truck. The room erupted in laughter. I didn't move. Sophie's eyes found mine across the ballroom, and for the first time that entire night, I saw something in them that I didn't expect. Guilt. She mouthed 2 words, "I'm sorry." I nodded slowly. Then I stood up. The room didn't notice me at first. I was just a quiet old man from table 14. Nobody important. I straightened my jacket. I walked in front of the ballroom, past 300 guests, past the champagne towers, past a towering ice sculpture shaped like 2 swans, past Richard Davenport's smug, contented face. I stopped in front of Vivian and gently took the microphone from her hand. She looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "What are you doing?" she hissed. "Giving a toast," I said calmly. The room went quiet. I looked out at the crowd. Then I looked at my daughter. "Sophie," I began, "you are the single greatest thing I've ever been part of. Your mother would be so incredibly proud of the woman you become." Sophie's eyes glistened. "I know I'm not what this family expected. I drive an old truck. I wear the same suit I wore to your mother's funeral. I live in a small house in a small town. And I know some people in this room think that makes me less than, that it makes me an embarrassment. Vivian's smile froze on her face, like a crack in porcelain. Richard shifted in his chair. But I want to tell you something, Sophie. Something I should have told you a long, long time ago. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a folded document. When you were born, I started a trust in your name. Every year, I deposited money from a patent I hold, a small invention that ended up being used in water treatment systems around the world. I unfolded the paper and placed it on the table in front of Sophie. That trust, as of last Tuesday, is worth $247 million. I let that settle. And it's yours, sweetheart. It's always been yours. Dead silence. Not polite silence. The kind of silence where you can hear ice melting in a glass 3 tables away. Sophie looked at the document, then at me, then back at the document. Dad, what? There's more, I said. I looked at Gerald, who was already standing, leather briefcase in hand, walking to the front of the room like a man who had done this 100 times. This is Gerald Hoffman, I said. He's been my personal attorney for 20 years. He also manages the Briggs Family Trust, which has a current total valuation of $1.3 billion. Gerald nodded politely at the room. Richard Davenport's face went the color of old milk. Vivian's hand gripped the edge of the table, so hard her knuckles turned white. But here's the part that concerns me tonight. I continued. Gerald, would you share what we found? Gerald opened the briefcase and removed a thin folder. He spoke clearly, unhurried, like a surgeon making an incision. In preparation for this marriage, we conducted a standard financial review, as any responsible family office would. Mr. Davenport, he looked directly at Richard. Your dealership chain is $14.2 million in debt. You have defaulted on 3 commercial loans. Your home carries a second and third mortgage. Your country club membership, including the account currently funding tonight's event, is 90 days past due. Nobody breathed. Additionally, Gerald continued, your son Jonathan has approximately $280,000 in undisclosed student loan debt. And most notably, his attorney drafted a prenuptial agreement designed to ensure that in the event of divorce, Sophie Briggs would walk away with almost nothing, while Jonathan retains control of all shared assets. Gerald placed a folder in front of Sophie. I wanted you to see everything, sweetheart, I said softly, before you make any decisions. Sophie opened the folder. She read the prenup. Her hands began to tremble. She looked up at Jonathan. Is this true? Jonathan opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Sophie, I can explain. Is this true? He looked at his mother, his father. Neither one moved. Neither one spoke. Yes, he whispered. Sophie closed the folder. She stood up from the head table, in her white gown, in front of 300 silent guests, under a crystal chandelier that probably cost more than my truck, and she walked across the room. She stopped directly in front of me, and she said 4 words I will carry with me until the day I die. Take me home, Dad. We drove back to Collinsville in my old pickup truck. Sophie still in her wedding dress, the tool bunched up against the dashboard, mascara streaked in dark rivers down her cheeks. For the first 30 minutes, neither of us said a word. Then, somewhere on a dark stretch of Highway 44, she spoke. How long? How long what? How long have you been a billionaire? Since before you were born. She stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time. Why didn't you tell me? I thought about that for a long time. The headlights carved tunnels into the dark. Because your mother asked me not to let it change who I was. And I was afraid, truly afraid, that if you knew it might change who you were too. Sophie started crying then. Not the dramatic, cinematic kind. The deep, quiet kind that comes from somewhere so far inside you can't reach it with your hands. I was ashamed of you, Dad. I know. I let them laugh at you. I know. I almost let them seat you by the kitchen doors. At my own wedding. Your own daughter's wedding. I know, sweetheart. She broke down completely, sobbing into her hands, the white dress crumpling around her like a fallen parachute. I pulled the truck over to the shoulder, turned off the engine, and I held my daughter the way I used to hold her when she was 5 years old and frightened of thunderstorms. Listen to me, I said. I didn't do what I did tonight to humiliate anyone. I did it because you are my daughter. And no one, no family, no amount of money, no crystal chandelier gets to decide what you're worth, or what I'm worth. She pulled back and looked at me. You're not angry? I'm heartbroken, I said. But I'm not angry, because the girl I raised is still in there. She just got lost for a little while. We sat on the side of that highway for 20 minutes. Sophie in her wedding dress, me in my funeral suit, the crickets singing like nothing in the world had happened. But everything had. The aftermath was quiet. No lawsuits. No public spectacle. Gerald sent a formal letter to the Davenport's attorney outlining the financial misrepresentation and the predatory structure of the prenup. The marriage was annulled within 60 days. Richard Davenport's dealership chain filed for bankruptcy 4 months later. Not because of anything I did. The debts were already eating him alive. I simply removed the life raft they thought my daughter was going to be. Vivian stopped attending the country club shortly after. I heard she told people the wedding just didn't work out. She never mentioned my name again. Jonathan sent Sophie a letter. She never opened it. Sophie moved back to Collinsville for a while. She slept in her childhood bed. She ate pot roast on Sundays and helped me mow the lawn on Saturdays. One Saturday morning, she stopped the mower in the middle of the front yard and looked at the house. This house, she said, it's the same one I grew up in. Yep, and you could have lived anywhere in the world. I could have. Why here? I looked at the front porch. The same porch where Catherine sat with her morning coffee. The same steps where Sophie took her first wobbly walk. Because this is where everything that matters happened. Sophie didn't say anything. She just walked over and hugged me, smelling like cut grass and sunscreen, the way she used it when she was 12. I'm 68 now. Sophie started her own law firm last year. She specializes in elder advocacy, protecting older people from exploitation, from families who try to take advantage, from the world that looks at someone in an old suit and decides they don't matter. She named the firm Briggs & Associates. Not Davenport. Briggs.